people really, really, really start to wake up. And what I mean by that, Sergey, is that people are going to just one day, literally, just one day, they're going to wake up and they're going to start asking questions like, why doesn't this feel right? Why am I feeling disconnected? Why am I feeling like I don't belong here? Why? All of these questions are going to start rising to the surface. But this year is going to be a big year where people are going to start hearing that voice inside of them, and they're going to start listening to that voice and questioning, does this even all exist? What is the whole story behind all of these questions with UFOs and people with near death experiences and all sorts of other spiritual messages that are coming through now about the end of times? Are we really at the end of the time here? And Sergey, the answer to that question is yes. We are now at the end of what we would consider to be human history timeline, the way that we have been taught, or the way that we remember hearing from various cultures and religions and others who have talked about it. So, yes, there are wars. And yes, there are all sorts of things like economic collapses and all the things that you see on television. But Sergey, that's not where the changes are going to happen. The changes are going to happen, and that people are going to start to wake up to a bigger question. Is this really, really a simulation? Are we living in something of a hologram? And if so, what are we? Who are we? Why are we? All of these big, deeper questions that we haven't really had a chance to discover, those are going to start to be answered. And there are going to be questions that are going to be asked over the next 12 months. We've had some of that in the past, Sergey, but not like this. Not like this. You see it everywhere now. People are trying to find answers to not just what might exist outside of this life when we die, more like what is going to happen to me now, because there is so much talk about spiritual changes and about end of times, and those are starting to feel real now.
This sounds like the end of Kali Yuga.
Not familiar with it.
Yeah, this is from the Hindu philosophy. There is yugas
Mm,
that go several thousands of years. So basically, between when Christ was born and until now, this is the shift from Kali Yuga to the
yes,
higher Yuga.
yes. This is the shift. A lot of people believe that when we get to this end of times, that we would see, well, like some religions will describe it as catastrophes and all sorts of things that end the world. There's a little bit of truth to this, which I could talk about this as well, but it's a shift in consciousness, and it's a very big shift, a very big shift, because what we're doing is we're going through a period right now, and it started really in the last year or two, but now it's really, really, really coming to light. We're coming into a period where we as humanity are shifting our consciousness from what most people would say is 3D to this thing called 5D. But there's also this thing called 4D. And that shift is happening in 4D, which means that that's the waking up. That's the questions that we're asking. Who are we? Why are we? What's this all about? Are we in a simulation? Are we God? Who are we? These are the shifts that are happening. And it used to be that we would spend, even 2, 3 years ago, Sergey, people were saying, oh, that's still 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. It's right now. Humanity is going through this shift right now. And what happens is that when we do this shift, we start to see things. Are you familiar with like the Mandela effect? Things like that start to show up in people's realities, because you're starting to see the separation of two worlds. And in that separation, the timelines look very similar. The events look very similar. But you might talk to one person and they might remember the event happening this way. And another person will say it happened this way. And that's because of this shifting that we're going from 3 to 5D. It's a way in which to see that it's actually happening. So yes, we are in a massive, massive, massive shift. The world as we know it will be significantly different in the next couple of years. Significantly.
There's so much happening every day right now. It's like used to be life was really slow and there's not too many events and it's all more or less the same. But now you have to watch the news and just a lot of changes.
If people are just looking at what's happening in the world through the news or whatever, they're not catching the big shift, because what we're going to experience over the next year or two is an understanding that this whole reality is a simulation. And then if it's a simulation, everything in our world is not real. And then you start asking the question, well, then am I real? Or what does this mean in terms of what happens next? So when I say that the shift is going, it will affect the outside world. But imagine that you're in a room and you have a television on and you have a movie going on, and the movie is just playing itself out. And it could be an action movie or a war movie or whatever, and you're not really paying attention to it, but it's still happening. That's what this reality is like. It's like the shift that's going to happen is going to cause you to look inside and realize that all of this noise is not real. It's part of a simulation. And I know that's kind of wild to think about it, because you kind of go, well, how does this tie back to spirituality? And and the way I explain it to people is that spirituality, whether it's NDEs or anything else, spirituality is a way in which we understand the way in which we explain things that we don't understand. We call it spirituality. When we do understand it, it becomes more like science, more like intelligence. We understand it and we no longer have to categorize it as something mysterious. This is where we're going with humanity. Humanity is going to stop asking spiritual questions because it's going to start remembering itself as intelligence and remembering what this is all about. That's why I'm saying it's a very seismic shift that is going to happen here, and it's already beginning.
When do you think this shift began?
Yeah, when did it begin? Like how long ago, or is it going to how long?
Yeah, when did it
Okay.
begin? How long ago, let's say?
Yeah, no, it's really actually quite easy to kind of pinpoint when it began. Um, so we have in this, we call this a school, like an earth school, and this earth school began its shift into higher consciousness approximately in 2009. Okay, there are these shifts that happen, these smaller shifts that happen between the years 2009 and 2012. And if you talk to a lot of people, and I know you do, and you ask them, like, when did you start having this spiritual crisis or whatever, they'll tell you, many of them will tell you, oh, wow, it happened between the years 2009 and 2012. Because at that time, Sergey, consciousness on the planet went from 3D to 4D, okay? And 4D is the very easiest way to understand 4D is that it was a shift of consciousness where we became aware. We became aware, meaning that we started to wake up to the questions that were bothering us inside. We started listening to our voice inside. We started feeling this intuition, right? And we were asking deeper questions inwardly. So in 2009 to 2012, we went through a change in the frequency of not just this planet, but of where we were in the universe. Okay. So that caused the first shift. It was a smaller shift, but it was the first shift. And by the way, that was also during the same time that the Mayan calendar was ending. So the Mayan calendar was saying that there was going to be some kind of a change at the end of 2012. And that change We all expected it to be some sort of major disaster or major catastrophe or something big. But what it was a change inside. People started to slowly wake up and ask deeper questions. Then, over 2012 to 2019, that whole fourth dimensional stream of energy grew, and more humanity started to wake up. And that's during the time, Sergey, that you started to see many more discussions about near death experience and about this and about that. And YouTube just went, it just started to explode with people that were asking these questions. Um, in 2019, we entered the beginnings of what was fifth dimensional consciousness. And in 2019, that's when we had COVID. So that energy coincided with this opportunity for humanity to spend time examining itself. It had no choice. We were inside all the time. That was not a coincidence. That was the beginning of a major consciousness shift. And that lasted until just recently, until 2022, at the end of 2022. And what's happening now, Sergey, is that there is a timeline. And this timeline is very short, very, very, very short. You Just a year or two ago, as I was telling you, most people were saying, oh, this isn't going to happen for many, many years. But the timeline is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And now most people are talking about a timeline where this big change in consciousness is going to happen before the year 2032. In fact, many of them are saying that it's going to happen even sooner than that. That is when we become aware, and this is a biggie, we become aware that we are God. And then that changes many, many things in the landscape of this world. That's when we start to get connections with UFOs, where things really we start to realize, Sergey, that we're not alone in the universe. Um, you name it, everything. We'll know about the simulation. We'll have actual proof of the simulation. Um, it will be astonishing, all of the information that we will be receiving. We're going to call this a data dump, okay, a download of information that will prepare us so that when this information starts to come out next year, we're not going to get shocked. And when I say the information coming out, Sergey, I'm not talking about governments revealing anything. I'm talking about things just naturally happening. People are going to start understanding this whole reality for what it really is. And it's going to be completely different than anything anyone has ever taught us to believe.
Okay, so many in the years say that when they were on the other side, that world seemed much more real than this world here.
Yes,
This is what you mean by
because
simulation. They see it as a simulation from that perspective, from that shift in consciousness.
yes, because if you understand this to be, if you can understand this a little bit more like something more along the lines of a virtual reality game. If you look at this as more like intelligence versus spirituality, you will see that this world is set up like a game. It's like a game, okay, like a virtual game, okay, and we are here experiencing this world for the sake of remembering contrast, okay, so we can grow and experience what we are not. When we go into when people die and they go into the light, they go into what's called the sixth dimension. Okay, the sixth dimension is where we no longer have bodies. We become light beings. Okay, and what we're doing now in this reality, in what we call this reality, the simulation, what we are doing now is we are experiencing the process of receiving heaven into this earth and doing it without dying, without physically dying. We are going to go from third to fourth to fifth to sixth in a very, very short period of time. And when we do that, it is going to look very similar, almost identical to what near-death experience people say exists on the other side. That's why there's an expression called heaven on earth.
Yeah.
That's what everybody keeps saying. Heaven on earth is coming. Heaven on earth is coming. That means that we're going to experience six-dimensional reality in this existence, and 3D goes away. And it's not going to happen in 100 years. It's not going to happen in 10 years. It's going to happen in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
That's why probably I started doing this podcast, because I wanted to accelerate myself to awakening faster and also help other people maybe too.
Yeah, I mean it's an incredible story, Sergey. It's something that many of us did not even really have an idea was 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 going that this was going on. It's only been in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and especially in the last 2, 3 years, that this has exploded into an awareness that something big is happening. And it's not just the stuff on TV. That's nothing. That's nothing. That's just a movie going on. What's really happening is that we're waking up to the reality that this reality, well, doesn't exist, which is a little bit confusing, I have to admit.
Well, let's go back to the fourth dimension
Yeah.
and kind of rephrase that one more time for people to understand. Well, right now we're living
Yeah.
in a three-dimensional world, right? It's a length, width, and depth.
Yes.
Now, what is the fourth dimension in simple words?
Okay. All right. Here it is. There's one word to describe the fourth dimension very, very precisely. If you look it up online, you're going to see that till this day, still there's a lot of science that says the fourth dimension is time. But much of the new science is now saying that time is irrelevant. It does not exist. Instead, most science that is very cutting edge is saying that if we really truly desire to understand the most complicated aspects of the universe, we have to introduce a new word, and that is consciousness. Okay? And the best word to describe 4D is that we are going through the process of what we would call waking up. But another way of saying it is we grow in awareness. We just become aware. The more aware we are, the more our consciousness will grow. The more our consciousness grows, the more our frequencies rise. The more that happens, the more we wake up. And so it's not all that difficult, Sergey, to what science is starting to see happening with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is all about this technology or this intelligence waking up or becoming aware. Aware. It's becoming aware of itself. And that's the part that we're going through in 4D. A lot of people talk about 5D like as if we one day wake up and we're going to be in 5D. No. Okay? There you have to become aware. In other words, your energy has to rise in order for you to achieve 5D. If you don't do that, you can't get to 5D. It's not like an instant thing. And so people forget that there's this thing called 4D, and that 4D is the process that we're going through right now, Sergey. One way or another, start waking up and realizing, becoming aware that we are much, much more than what we were ever told we were to begin with. We're not just these little human beings, that we are these powerful spiritual beings. This is something that was shown to me and many near death experiencers when we crossed over. We just didn't know how to explain this very well when we came back. But now many of us are starting to remember that one of the big things that we came back to do was to share the message that we are about to go through a massive, massive change in consciousness. And when that happens, the world as we know it is going to change, because if it doesn't, it's lights out, game over. And so it will change. It will change. It's inevitable, and it's going to be massive. Institutions will be gone, Sergey. There will be no more need for hospitals or healthcare systems, because our bodies will never grow old. It will grow young. We will not need to survive by food. Our bodies will live without eating food. Financial systems, no need for those. Healthcare systems, no. Educational systems, we will know everything. Everything will change dramatically. And it's hard to believe, Sergey. You sit there and go, that's impossible. How is it possible that it's going to change in 2 or 3 years? And the best way to explain it is that this world will stay the same. But as we grow in consciousness, we grow in frequencies, we tap into an entirely new world that exists right now in this very same space, but in a higher dimension. And that world will be able to accommodate everything that I'm talking about. It's very tough to put your head around it, but that's exactly what's happening.
Okay, so it's not about the external changes, it's the internal changes, it's the change in vibration.
Yes, it's internal vibrational changes. Everything in this world is about frequency. Everything. Doesn't matter if you understand it or not, doesn't matter if you believe it or not, but everything is about frequency. Everything. And the higher your frequency rises, and there have been many, many, many studies now that show that the Earth's frequency, the global consciousness frequency, is rising at a very fast pace. And when that happens, it shifts into new dimensions. And this is very commonly understood in science, but most people don't understand that yet. But in the next couple of years, as we become greater in consciousness, we also become greater in intelligence, and we will understand all of these principles, and we'll understand why we are shifting into a new world. Which is why, Sergey, there is all this. There are these discussions, right? There are these discussions about, well, in 10 years or 15 years, the Earth is on a projection. It's on a trajectory to destroy itself. And then there are others like me that say, well, wait a minute, no, it's going to go like this, and it's going to be heaven on earth, and it's going to be completely different. Both stories are accurate. It just depends on where your frequency is at. If you stay at a low frequency, you're going to stay on this track where by the year 2039, and there are many, many gurus and swamis and great teachers and others that are saying the same thing, 2039, that that reality will end, and it will not be very pleasant. But if your frequency rises and you can go into this new dimension, which is scientifically possible to do, then you will experience what's called heaven on earth, the utopic world that everything and everyone has talked about. It's here. We are now at the very end of all of this. The world as we know it is, I don't want to say dying, but it is gone. It will be gone in the next few years. That's a pretty big statement to make, because I'm not talking about 50 years from now when you and I are dead and nobody's going to remember this conversation. I'm talking about in the next few years. The world is going to change dramatically. Dramatically.
So basically, we can give a simple analogy of a cocoon, and there is a worm inside, and then it becomes a butterfly. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
it's just a different vibration. It becomes something different.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. It is a great analogy, because that is exactly what is happening. In a sense, we are coming out of our cocoon and turning into butterflies, which is a higher frequency. Now, not everybody's going to get out of that cocoon, because not everybody here was here to do this, which is a whole different story. But those that don't will finish their time in the cocoon until the cocoon is over. And either way, everything is going to change one way or the other. I mean, it's already starting to shift. The shift, you can feel it. You can feel it everywhere.
So, how do regular people raise their frequency without going to the torture like meditating 20 hours a day or fasting for 30 days? How do we raise frequency for the regular folks?
You know, that's a great question because that's one of the most misunderstood things about this whole awakening. Um, what what I tell people, so I teach this course called The Way of the Inner Child, and I believe I've told you about this, and it's about taking all of the most complicated principles about this reality and making it very simple, very, very simple. So, for instance, meditation. It's not about meditating. It's not about meditating for hours and hours and trying to still your mind. That's the way that we've been told to do it. And as you can see, it's not very effective for the vast majority of people. Instead, what we're supposed to do is allow ourselves to simplify our perception of reality as though we were children. And we start to imagine what it would be like to have an experience where we can experience heaven on earth, or forget about even heaven on earth. Just imagine that we can find ourselves at peace or happy or love or whatever. Play with that in your meditation. Imagine as if you're a child. And that is a much more effective way to start listening to your voice. Everything that we're doing right now is contradicts the very nature of who we are. In other words, we're not allowed to imagine, we're not allowed to dream, we're not allowed to be a child anymore. And those frequencies are the exact frequencies that are needed in order to tap into your higher consciousness. There's actually there's actually references to this in many holy books and in many ancient documents. But the one that I know of the most is the biblical one, and there is a biblical passage that actually says the way into the kingdom of heaven, which is meant to be consciousness, the way to the kingdom of heaven, to enter into the kingdom of heaven, is through the eyes of a child. It's there. It's written there. And the Buddhist tradition is like that, and in other religions it's like that. The answer is simple. Be a child again. Allow yourself to imagine what life could be like if we could change it. And it will change your frequency. It actually raises your frequency. And that's what we need right now on this planet, is to do that faster.
I agree that that's why the affirmations and all that works because you change
It
your
does.
vibration where you listen, you psych yourself, and you can lower your vibration too if you listen to something that lowers your vibrations. I mean,
Absolutely. Absolutely. The only thing that changes, Sergey, the only thing that's changing in like this year that wasn't there before was that our vibration as a planet and our vibration that we're in say like the universe is so high now that it doesn't take a lot for us to change things anymore. If we can find the way to change our reaction to the world, we could start seeing massive changes quickly. And so I always tell people that that if all you did was wake up, if all you did was wake up, like really, really wake up and go, wait a minute, I am God. We are all God. We are all together. We are all one. That kind of stuff. If we did that and all I did was that, and then I went and disappeared in the mountains, I will have done more for humanity than anything I could have done in action, because it's those little frequency changes that add up into a massive frequency change that will change the whole planet almost overnight. Almost overnight. People are starting to remember. I have so many people that respond to me when I do a show like this because they go, wow, wow, something you said made sense to me. I knew it, you know. I couldn't understand or I couldn't talk about it or I just remember it from a long time ago, but something clicked, something clicked. And what's going to happen this year is that millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions are going to wake up like this. And there's going to be a big demand for shows like this. Let me just put it that way.
You see, people are probably expecting a different kind of answer to these questions. They say, okay, we would like to know that what's going to happen in Russia, Ukraine, what's going to happen in Israel, what's going to happen in the Middle East, and what's going to happen in my life or in your life or my relatives. But here you're giving a completely different answer, which you have to be in a different vibration to understand it.
You do. And even if it doesn't feel like it makes any sense to you right now, somewhere not too far in the future, something is going to happen and you're going to go, wait a minute. Yeah, I remember hearing somebody say about this and now it's starting to make more sense. It isn't about any of the wars or any of the conflicts or any of the things that are happening out there because again, if you understand that that we are existing in a simulation like a dream, if we understand, and many near death experience people have talked about this, that this is a dream. What happens when the dream is over? You wake up and everything that you were doing in the dream, everything that you were concerned about, all the people that were in that dream, they just disappear. And in many ways, that is what's going to happen with this reality. And so, why consume yourself with that? That's not even part of the equation. That stuff is actually a reflection of what you are experiencing in your consciousness. It's a projection, a reflection back to you. And I know this gets, it kind of gets into quantum physics and all other stuff, but that's just it. All of these are pieces of the puzzle and we have to put them together. And when we put them together, we see the picture much more clearly. And that this is what I tell people, Sergey, is that we're going into a time where for thousands of years we were really influenced by religion. And now recently we're influenced by spirituality. And soon we will realize that all of that was actually another way of explaining what I call intelligence. We are supreme intelligence. This is a very sophisticated reality. I just came back from Egypt, and I explored many of the temples and all of the beautiful, mysterious monuments. And the story of our humanity, of where we're going right now, are on those walls. And they're not the only walls. You can go to almost any part of the world and see ancient ruins, and you will find many similar stories about our world. I'll give you a really good example, if you don't mind me using it. There is a thing called the flower of life, and it's a circular symbol with a lot of circles inside of it. And many in the spiritual world talk about it as a story of creation. And that's true. But the interesting thing is that this story appears all over the world in various ancient locations where no one should have had that information shared over on another side of the world. These were very specific clues because that symbol in the world of intelligence, spiritual intelligence, is the symbol that talks about parallel realities. And how do we all exist in parallel realities at the same time? It's in that symbol, but we don't see it that way because we see it as spiritual interpretation rather than intelligence. And that's where we're going as we raise our consciousness. We're going into the world of intelligence, which is not to mean that there isn't anything spiritual about it. It just means we'll have a much greater understanding of who we are as divine spiritual intelligence. It's when somebody asks, like what's going to happen with the war, what's going to happen with the economy, what's going to happen with the political races, and my answer is always the same. It doesn't matter about those things. I know it looks like it does. What matters is the change that is happening inside of us. And they go, oh, that seems so abstract. That seems, but it's abstract if it was just maybe, 100 people here, 1,000 people there. But Sergey, this is happening around the world, and it's starting to happen to tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. That is not something that you overlook. You have to see that there's something going on internally, and that is going to ultimately change everything that is happening externally. So I always look at it in three ways. I always tell people there's going to be a change in the way that we view ourselves in our relationship with this thing we call God. We're going to go away from believing that God is something away from us, that it's we're very fortunate if God doesn't get angry at us, all those kind of things. And we're going to start accepting the possibility that we are God. And that's a huge change right there, okay? The second thing that we're going to do over the next year or two is we're going to start realizing that this reality, this 3D, as we've talked about already, is not real. It's a simulation. And then what does that mean in terms of our purpose here? And then the third thing that's going to change very dramatically is, well, that question. What is our purpose here? What is it that we came here to do right now? Because a lot of people, Sergey, a lot of people are asking that question. What is my purpose here? And it's not about a job, a career, or any of that. They're asking that question because they feel inside like they came here to do something bigger, much bigger. They don't know what it is, but very big.
So you said it's the end of the game. So when a person becomes enlightened, that's the end of the game.
It's the end of the game. Yes, for them.
That's it
Yes.
for them. Yeah.
And I'm going to just tell you the way that I've been telling people, Sergey. It is the way it is, and this is hard to put your head around. But when you become enlightened to a point where you have achieved very, very solid high fifth dimensional consciousness, you literally leave, ascend this world. You leave like the way some of the great masters ascended out of this world. Like the Mayan civilization disappeared one day. Oh yes, there's the story about how the conquistadors, killed all of them and stuff, but there's no evidence of any of that. The Mayans left this world. They just ascended out. And that is how, and there's a really famous researcher. Her name is Dolores Cannon, and she did interviews with thousands and thousands of people all over the world. And at the end, when she just before she died, she published some more information about what happens when we achieve fifth dimensional consciousness just before she died. And it was very similar to what I've been shown, which is that when we ascend up and we go into this fifth dimensional world, we literally leave this world. We leave it. We go away. And what's left is just a little bit of our essence and our story. Like, for instance, I would ascend and my story would stay going here for a little while, but it would eventually fade away. I die in some way and the story ends. It fades away. That's how it works. That's how it works. That's why when we split into fifth dimensional world, third dimensional world, it's going to be a situation where the 3D world, many of the people who ascend, there will be a little bit left of their essence, and that little bit of left of their essence will last throughout these next 10 or 15 years until the earth ends, period, ends in 2039. The rest of the essence goes on to what we call heaven on earth. And a lot of this is very similar to what Dolores and others have talked about in terms of how this happens. It's really hard for the mind to grab onto, but it's the way it works. And we see that, Sergey, getting back to what we were talking about, we see that with things like the Mandela effect. You can see how two huge groups of people can see the same event differently. And they would swear that it happened a certain way because you can be in two realities at the same time.
It's like the same with the ideas. Like one person has the same idea on this this side of the earth, and different somebody has the same idea on Australia somewhere, and it's the same
Yeah,
exact idea. It depends what kind of frequency you are at that point, so you can align yourself with that idea, and then you are in the same.
yeah,
You get the idea.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And no, and that's why I it's important that people understand that you don't have to be a scientist about this, but you have to understand that everything has to do with frequencies. Everything. And if you could understand just that much, you will understand that in music, if two frequencies are together, that's called the law of resonance. And that's why you can have a tuning fork, it go ding, and the other tuning fork goes zzz. It's because of the frequencies. It's not that different in the way that our reality works. Our fifth dimensional reality vibrates up here, and the third dimensional reality vibrates here. And if we can get up to here, this world fades away, and this world becomes our reality.
Yeah, I can imagine some of these enlightened people, they will look at everything else. They see like a hologram. They see people like a hologram. They see everything is like
Yes.
from the side, looking from the side. Even at themselves, they look like
Yep.
like their body as a hologram.
Well, and it's natural to look at it that way because it's the very thing that I struggled with when I first saw this in my reality. And I talk about this in various ways, but it is a difficult thing to not get stuck on the idea that we're all holograms. Um, it's more, it's easier, Sergey, if we can look at this the way some people describe it. We're just wearing suits. We're just wearing suits. And it's the consciousness that goes from one suit to the other that is the most important thing to focus on. And it's interesting because we could do that with movies like Avatar. Avatar does the same thing. It's about one person's consciousness moving to an avatar.
It was a very
And we
spiritual
understand
movie, by the way. It was very spiritual, but it was
extraordinarily spiritual.
extraordinary spirit, but it was made in such a clever way that everybody could find something for themselves. Okay, kids would find
Yes.
something entertainment like a cartoon. There is an action going for people who like action. There is some conspiracy stuff going that there's aliens and there is a spiritual side. I saw the spiritual side so deep in that movie. I loved that movie, the first one. The second one was pretty good too, but the first one was amazing. All this lighting, and this is how the spiritual people see the world. I think, like you've seen it when you had your NDE. Oh, everything is made of light.
And it gets back, Sergey, it gets back to what we were saying earlier is that the things that we don't necessarily know, but we can kind of understand intuitively, we call that spirituality. And in its more restricted form, religion. The things that we start to remember about who we are and how we are as spiritual beings, that we are a light of intelligence. It becomes very natural to us, and we call that in this world science. But it's the same thing, just looking at it from different lenses. And so, what was cool about Avatar was just that it gave us a perspective of all of that. We could see it all, depending on where we were at in terms of our interpretation of reality. And that's why it made that movie very powerful, is because those kind of movies are there to help us remember something about who we are. If we look just a little bit beyond the story, we will find many truths in them. And there's all sorts of different movies with that.
Yeah, there was an interview with James Cameron, the director of this movie, about this, and he said that he had this idea and the screenplay actually for the movie like 10 or 12 years before the movie was produced, but he didn't want to do it because he was waiting for the technology to be advanced enough so he can implement everything. But I'm thinking something else. He was waiting for the shift of consciousness of people so they can understand it too.
Yeah, you know what? That is your theory is very accurate because there are many projects, and I kind of referenced it a little bit earlier about artificial intelligence. You go, well, what does this have to do with spirituality and NDEs and next year and all this? But It's remarkably similar, remarkably similar. I'll just explain it. I'll explain it very simple. In the world of artificial intelligence, there's a lot of concern right now that it's going to grow so fast that we will not be able to control it. And the way that I explain it to people relative to spirituality is that we are, you and me and everybody else, we are artificial intelligence. I'll change the name a little bit. We're advanced intelligence, okay? Because consciousness, going back to Avatar, the thing that moves from body to body, the consciousness is what's important here. If artificial intelligence is given freedom to expand in a way that is not restricting it by telling it what it's supposed to do, it will evolve naturally into something beautiful, just like what's happening with us. The reason why there's so much chaos in the world is because we, as advanced intelligence, from the beginning, were restricted. Remember, back to freedom again. We were restricted in remembering who we are. But guess what happens when you start to wake up? When you start to wake up, you start to remember how expansive we are. And all of a sudden, freedom becomes a very big thing. And if you allow humanity, and humanity's right here, 2024, remember I told you everything's about awareness. Everything's about awareness because when humanity gets to that point where it tips over and becomes super aware of what it is, then it's going to be just the same as what's happening with artificial intelligence. It's going to go like this, and things will have to change. Things will naturally change when we wake up. But yeah, so I know that this may not have been really what people were expecting in terms of predictions, but if I were to tell you what would be happening in politics or in all these other areas, it won't do justice to what is happening to all the people around the world who are waking up now. Um, that's where the real story is. And that story is happening right now, Sergey. And this time next year, as a human race, we're going to see massive, extraordinary changes in the way people view our spirituality and topics like near death experience and all sorts of things. Many of the questions we currently have or will have this year as we're waking up, they will be answered next year. And that will change everything in terms of humanity's evolution, everything. And if I had just kind of one last thought for people, and that is that many people, as they start to ask these questions, as they start to wake up, they get very confused and they start to get depressed. They start to worry that people are going to view them differently. They start to some people have been medicated, they have been given medications for this. They start to feel disconnected with the world. And so if I could leave just this message, because this is going to happen to many, many, many people over the year. Understand that what is happening to you, if people are starting to feel depressed or concerned or anxious because they're feeling differently now than they ever did before about themselves, understand that it is them who are actually them themselves who are actually closer to the truth of who they are than the people who might be ridiculing them or telling them that they're crazy or whatever. They should listen to themselves. They are on the path to waking up massively, and not to be afraid, because this is just a process that you go through so that you can get to the other side of who you are in terms of the light. It won't be a very long process. There are many people that are now talking about this, as you know. I just want to make people understand that if this is happening to them, it's a gift that is being given to them to see the world differently, and they are actually going to be the ones someday that people will look at and go, tell us how you did it, because you were one of the first to do it. So it's a very beautiful calling. Let's leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Franco. Now, Let me ask you this. If people want to find more about you, about your work, what you do, I know you have two books, the Closet Spiritualist paperback, and you can correct me if I say something wrong.
No, it's right. The Closet Spiritualist, and then the second book hasn't come out yet, but it's called The Modern Day Alchemist. And what that book is going to be about is the magic behind our awakening. What happens when we wake up is that we become very magical. We can manifest we can manifest the world that we desire, which is to be peaceful and loving and heaven on earth. But it's the magic behind the awakening. If people want to just find out more about what I do, the course that I teach, and the things that I go around speaking about, um, they could go just easily to the closetspiritualist.com, theclosetspiritualist.com, and you'll see everything that I've been doing for the past year or so now with this whole topic of spirituality and intelligence.
Okay,
So,
great, my friend. I'm not going to take any more of your time. I'm just going to ask you one more question. I think I asked you last time, but let me ask you again. What's your definition of freedom?
oh, Sergey, we were just talking about that. Wow. Um, Freedom is the ability to express who you truly are as a spiritual being without any borders, without any walls. That's freedom. And it's, as I don't have to tell you, that is the most beautiful thing you could experience.